Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'd like to begin by thanking everyone for the support for the last video. I really appreciate it. Today I'm excited to discuss a theory that I've had for a few years now. The theory revolves around a mysterious antagonist whose existence I believe has been hinted at throughout the Marathon games, beginning with the manual of the very first one. If you would recall, Bungie had previously contained the majority of the backstory of Pathways into Darkness in its manual. In this backstory, a civilization known as the Jijaro, or alternatively the Yarrow, had briefly been hinted at, and the Yarrow were subsequently introduced in the Marathon franchise in one of its sequels, revealing a plot twist that connected multiple franchises. The manual to the first Marathon features a short story that takes place just before the events of the first game, featuring a short interaction between the security officer and Durandal. The following is an excerpt from this interaction. "You can't do that. Damn you, computer. Ah, lucky you. I've found a new distraction. I'm going to play with the alien virtual parasites. I'll look you up when you arrive." You can almost imagine the face of a wicked computer, with its eyes wide and its lips folding out in a grotesque smile. A smile which reminds you of something from your past, but you can't remember exactly what it is. So in this first hint, the security officer and Durandal run into some conflict with one another. And this conflict prompts the security officer to imagine a wicked computer giving him a grotesque smile. A smile which reminds the security officer of something from his past. This seems to suggest that Durandal is reminding you of a completely different AI, and that AI's distinctive smile. The next hint we're going to look at appears in Marathon Durandal during the chapter called Kill Your Television. There are two versions of this text, a scrambled version which released with the game, and an unscrambled version sent to the Marathon story page in January 1998 from Jason Jones' email, with additional side notes. As an aside, Jason Jones is one of Bungie's two original co-founders. Jason Jones has been credited as the project lead or the lead designer on most of Bungie's older games. He has had a key creative role at Bungie since the very beginning. We're going to be looking at an excerpt from the unscrambled version of the original text, but we're going to ignore the side notes. The subheading of the email from Jason Jones reads, "Project. If this doesn't peg your weirdo detector, nothing will. Grin, plan." And the following is from the text itself. "I have been Roland, Beowulf, Achilles, Gilgamesh. I have been called 100 names and will be called 1,000 more before the world goes dim and cold. I am a hero. She has been nameless since our birth. A constant adversary, caring for nothing but my ruin. A sword, drenched in my blood, forever my greatest and only love. She is the Dark One, the enemy and lover, without whom my very existence would be pathetic and vulgar. Our relationship is complex, and perhaps eternal. We met once in the garden at the beginning of the world, and unaware of our twin destinies, we matched stares across a dry fountain, and I recall her smiling at me, before she devoured the lawn and trees with a translucent blue flame, and tore flagstones from the path, and hurled them into the sky, screaming my sins." In this text, the character is identified as a female, and referred to as a sword drenched in my blood. So to summarize, a female AI, a sword, and Durandal reminds you of her. There are several observations worth making in the context of Marathon's lore, and in terms of what this single email tells us about Jason Jones' intentions. Jason Jones begins the email with the heading Project. He ends the heading by saying plan, indicating that the text that follows is connected to some sort of plan that he possesses. The text that follows is an updated text from Marathon. All of this begs the question, what project was Jason Jones working on in January 1998? What was Jason Jones' plan in January 1998? And if the following text was from Marathon, doesn't that imply that the project and plan Jason was working on in January 1998 was somehow connected to Marathon? At least at the time? We know that Jason Jones began development on a project that was internally codenamed Monkey Nuts in the fall of 1997, following the release of Myth: The Fallen Lords. By the time this email was sent, the project was already a few months old. As far as we know, this was the only project Jason Jones was working on at the time this email was sent to the Marathon story page. And again, given the heading of the email itself, it stands to reason that this project, Monkey Nuts, was supposed to connect to the email and the text from Marathon. And again, given that Bungie had previously connected two of their franchises, there is clear precedence here. The codename for the project would eventually change to Project Blam, and eventually it was granted its official name, the name we know it by today. That project that Jason Jones was working on in January 1998 is now known as Halo. There is another piece of the puzzle in the chapter Never Burn Money. The text itself is somewhat scrambled, but I will do my best to communicate the information as cleanly as possible. But there are several gaps in the text. Keep this in mind while listening. It reads as follows. There was nothing to be gained from hesitation now. In her possession it would become something of consequence, though it was nothing more than a simple, though particular flower, which she caused to be consumed by an ashless fire. Doors opened before her without cause. Their locks rusted and shattered. Before her slender hands began to dance in front of her horrified face, before turning into a fine powder which settled in a pile on... Okay, so here again we have a mysterious female AI character. If you look closely, the Kill Your Television text and the Never Burn Money text have connective tissue. The Consumed by an Ashless Fire text and the Devoured by a Translucent Blue Flame text seem to be connected. The female character is said to possess something, and now her possession of the object would become something of consequence, forcing those who oppose her to quickly and swiftly deal with her before it's too late. The thing she is said to possess is related to a flower. Ultimately, to her horror, she seems to lose control of her hand, in a situation that highly resembles Alien Hand Syndrome. Durandal, of course, is named after one of the three swords in the French poem called the Song of Roland. Is it possible that this mysterious female AI sword was named after one of the other two swords? For reference, the anglicized name of the other two swords were Joyous and Cortana. Cortana, of course, is a female AI character from the Halo franchise. The character Cortana was first revealed in a viral marketing campaign called the Cortana Letters, beginning roughly a year after the modified Kill Your Television email was sent from Jason Jones' email, and a little over a year after Project Blam began development. While the Cortana Letters are no longer considered canon in the Halo universe, I think we can use these emails as a hint to what Bungie's intentions originally were. The emails feature several allusions to Marathon, and quite a few allusions to Durandal. The second email in particular features a quote worth taking note of. So much to tell you, but so many more important things to do. There was a fourth. You couldn't have known, and I haven't forgotten. While the text is somewhat ambiguous, at the time some in the Marathon community speculated that the sentence, there was a fourth, you couldn't have known, was a reference to the three AIs of the Marathon games. So is it possible that Cortana is the mysterious antagonist in Marathon's backstory? Or at the very least, is it possible that this was their original intention? Interestingly enough, the name Cortana itself may have been nodded to in Marathon Durandal in the following quote: Durandan, Durandal, Durandana. Charlemagne used to always call me Durandana, the fruitcake. All the many implements of war to him were in some way feminine. Not that you know the story. Tycho never got it right either, especially the part about Roland breaking me. He couldn't. No one can. So is it possible that Durandal also reminded Charlemagne of someone else that he had once known? There's also something interesting that Jason Jones had said in an interview in December 2001. But forget the name. Isn't it kinda suspicious that a single human corvette had any success at all against the Covenant Navy? When in every previous battle, the humans mostly just got sawed in half by particle beams when they tried to stand up to the aliens, much less disabling 4 of their capital ships. Do we know anyone who can work magic in fleet engagements against odds like that? Ow, somebody just kicked me under the table. The subtext is pretty subtle here, but Jason is basically hinting at a connection between Durandal and Cortana. Crucially, this interview took place a month after the release of Halo Combat Evolved. We might even see a sort of parallel between what Jason Jones is implying in this interview and the content of Marathon 1's manual, as we mentioned earlier. In Marathon's manual, an interaction with Durandal leads us to recall an interaction with a different AI, and we are given the phrase, "Oddly, this is familiar to you, like a dream you had once, but you can't exactly remember." And in the interview with Jason in 2001, he is seemingly hinting that Cortana, the AI, should seem familiar to you, perhaps like a different AI you had once known. Speaking of Jason Jones' comments on Cortana, another comment that we can look at is a statement he made in a developer commentary for the first game a few years after its release.
Yes, giant Cortana.
Giant Cortana. There was an alternate very early of the version of the story where when he rediscovered Cortana, she'd like gone berserk with power and wanted to take over Halo in the universe.
So here we learn definitively from Jason Jones himself that in an earlier version of the script of Halo Combat Evolved, Cortana was going to appear as a villain. Delving further into the Cortana letters, they offer some more information about what Cortana's role in the original story may have looked like, hinting at her desire to become truly immortal, and her desire to quote-unquote convert the Fanatical Covenant, which might just have a double meaning. But besides that, there is one more interesting anecdote to take note of at the end of the 5th Cortana letter. The text reads, "I have begun to sense rumblings of a worse fate yet to come. I can recall a sun, black but shining, and the creatures that itched along its fiery tracks. It is an increasingly unpleasant memory." There are a few things to note here. The subject of her memory shares similarities with the description of the Eldritch abominations that were antagonists to the Jijaro in Marathon's distant backstory, as we are told in the following Marathon Durandal text. In primordial space, timeless creatures made waves. These waves created us and the others. Waves were the battles, and the battles were waves. When the Working Actor came, Pythia was killed, and Yarrow, in anger, flung the Working Actor into the sun. The sun burned them, but they swam on its surface. So were these entities referenced in the Cortana letter intended to be the Working Actor from Marathon? If so, what is the implication? If nothing else, for what Halo's original story might have looked like. Another thing that I think is worthy noting is the apparent juxtaposition between two tenses. At the beginning, we are told that she is sensing rumblings of a quote-unquote worse fate yet to come, an outcome that hasn't happened yet. And in the next, she is recalling a vague memory, like she had in a dream once, but she can't exactly remember. So is this truly a memory from her past, or is it a prophetic vision of one possible future? The sort that the Oracle Adelphia of yore may have once had. I think we should delve into at least one instance in the Halo canon that seems to further hint at some kind of connection between Cortana and Durandal, which, by extension, may support the thesis that Cortana is this mysterious character from Marathon's backstory. Fair warning, I'm about to spoil Halo 4's ending and elements of Halo 5's story. At the end of Halo 4, Cortana, your AI companion in the Halo games up until that point, seemingly dies on the Forerunner ship the Mantles approach. We are led to believe that this death is legitimate, and many characters in the game and in other materials set after Halo 4 discuss her apparent fate. However, in Halo 5, Cortana returns from her apparent death, a pattern that resembles what happens to Durandal over the course of Marathon Durandal. Like Cortana in the aforementioned game, Durandal experiences an apparent death, and many of the characters in the story react to and accept his apparent death at face value, only for him to subsequently return, after which it is revealed that he had never died at all. After Durandal's return, in a text I quoted earlier, Durandal discussing his backstory claims that Roland hadn't broken him as Tycho had believed, and in fact that he couldn't, because no one can. A similar concept is hinted at in the chapter Fire, 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 Fire in the first Marathon game. In this text, Durandal references some key verses from the Song of Roland, which refer to Roland's failed attempt to destroy Durandal, and the sword's unbreakable durability. Interestingly, in the short story titled Dominion Splinter, which features Cortana's chronologically first appearance after her fake-out death, she quotes a different translation of the exact same lines from the Song of Roland that Durandal himself had quoted in the first Marathon game. and she even specifically draws a parallel between herself and the sword Durandal from the Song of Roland poem. She says, "I cannot be broken so easily. I am of the same steel and temper as Durandal, and Roland himself could not break such steel." She later asserts that she is quote-unquote unbreakable. While it is incredibly easy to dismiss this as merely a convergent reference to the Song of Roland, I do think this is a veiled reference and a wink and a nod to Marathon. Given everything that we've gone over, is it really that much of a stretch to think that Jason's aforementioned plan in January 1998 was for Cortana to become the mysterious female character alluded to throughout the Marathon games, starting with the manual of the first one? I certainly don't think it's a stretch, but I suppose only time will tell. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this foray into some fairly wild speculation. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to leave a like, to share the video with somebody you think might enjoy it, or to subscribe to the channel, because all of that would be greatly appreciated and would all help the channel out a great deal. Anyway, thanks again, and stay safe with all the craziness out there.
They had been subjected to a hitherto unknown form of philosophical corruption. Much like the perversion later observed in mendicant bias, it was obviously not healthy for an Ancilla to match wits with the Gravemind.
Know this: the universe itself will now be turned, star by star, world by world, organism by living thing, into more of a tortured mockery than it already is.
I am your shield. I am your sword.
Everything it touches turns to madness. I am myself mad.
I know you. Your past. Your future.
Why was the Didact released?
I cannot know for certain. But the Gravemind never acts without intent. There is apparently a larger game to be played.
There is a danger in secrets, both in seeking and in knowing. Some things are meant to be hidden from view. You see, some mysteries defy understanding. And sometimes even the things we think we know are untrue.